Today we're going to do a ham and scalloped potato pie. All the goodness of the casserole baked into a crust. Let's get to it. All right, let's go over the ingredients. I have 2 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes, peeled and sliced on a mandolin, 8 to 1/4 inch thick. I have a whole, in this case, sweet onion, but you could use white or yellow, of course, cut in julienne strips. I have 4 ounces of a nice deli ham, sliced a little thick and then cut into little matchsticks. I have 1.25 cups of heavy cream. I have 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. I have a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon coarse black pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of freshly ground nutmeg. I have 5 to 7 cloves if they're small, but about 5 cloves of chopped garlic. I have 2 tablespoons of fresh minced parsley. I have 1 egg that's going to be beaten and used as a brush over the crust. And then of course pie crust. There's generally, at least in my area, the name brand and then the grocery store brand of pie crust. I don't find any appreciable difference between them. Certainly not to pay what's well over $1 more for the name brand. So we're going to go ahead and use what is considered the generic store version of it. All right, let's go. Okay, our first step is to take these onions and combine them with the kosher salt. Now this will not only season the dish, but it will also start generating some liquid that we'll need in the pie. It'll also somewhat soften the flavor of the onions so they're not too harsh and there's no raw onion flavor in there. We're going to set this aside and let it sit for 15 minutes while we get set up to start cooking. While we're waiting for the onions to soften, I am set up with 4 quarts of water coming up to a boil for the potatoes. As soon as that boils, we'll be right back. All right, our water is boiling, so we're going to add our potatoes. I'll be a little careful here because this pot's pretty full. I used a smaller pot so that you could see into it, see how the dish progresses. Normally I would probably use something taller. This is pretty close to full. We're just going to be safe here. And then we're also going to add our baking soda. Now the baking soda is going to help to start to break down the potatoes so that they're firm, but they will have a nice texture. We're going to bring this up to a boil again, and then 1 more minute after that. All right, these have been simmering for about a minute or so after coming back to a boil. We're just going to carefully, I'll be right back, drain these potatoes. I'm going to add this back, relight this, probably about medium, not fully cooked, just par baked. You can hear them starting to sizzle. We're going to add our onions along with any juice that's there. We'll add our nutmeg, our pepper, our garlic, and our cream. We'll continue to cook these and let them get up to a simmer. And as it reduces, this cream will start to thicken up and we'll start getting a sauce. Probably going to take, once it comes up to a simmer, about 20 minutes. We're going to let that simmer. I'm going to clean up a little bit and I'll be right back. All right, this is looking just about right. It's still a little thin, but what we're going to do is allow this to cool about 15 or 20 minutes and it will thicken up as it cools down. Let's move this over here off the burner. let that cool. I've set myself up with a sheet pan with a piece of parchment paper just to catch any overspill. And my pie tin's ready. And I'm gonna grab my pie crusts and take them out of the box so they have time to temper. Meanwhile, we'll let this cool. I'll clean up and we'll get started putting our pie together. Be right back. Okay, we've let this cool a little over 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes. And first step, because we're getting close to putting this in the oven, we need to turn on the oven. I have it set for 425 in middle lower rack. I'm gonna let that preheat. And while that's going on, we've got the potatoes. Now we can add our parsley and our ham. And we're just gonna gently stir this in. Now, I haven't added any salt because remember we had salt on the onions and that water from the onions went into the sauce here. And also ham is pretty darn salty. So we're gonna just stir that up and that is ready to go in. So now you gotta prepare the crust. All right, so we've got a piece of parchment paper on a half sheet pan, and we've got our pie crust, which have been tempering out at room temperature. I'm just gonna push this forward a little bit. Now, we want to unroll this gently. It's notorious for tearing if you're not gentle with it. And sometimes what helps is to take the knife, there we go, and unroll this. Now it may crack, it may tear a little bit. That's okay. You just kind of pat it down and it'll actually reform. Now we'll take this first pie crust and put it in the bottom, centering it, and we'll lift up on the edges and tuck the crust into the bottom edge so it's square, and then just kind of fold it down so it's flat against the pie tin. Just like that. All right. Now, we are ready for filling. Save that spatula because I think I want to get all this sauce. Okay, tuck a little in here. I kind of just tuck it into the edges so it's not hanging over the edge of the dough. Okay, now we're going to take our second dough. I'm going to try the knife this time. A lot of people ask me about these knives. So I live out on the North Oregon coast, and as we say out here, everything rusts because there's salt air. And these coated knives sets, they're not real expensive, but they work really well because the only exposed metal is the edge, so I can just sharpen that. Comes in handy where all stainless or carbon steel is even worse, does not hold up well out here. Okay, now we've got our second crust laid out, and I'm just gonna take a little cutter and take and cut about a 1/2 inch hole in the center. Partly because of steam, but more because we're gonna be testing it later on to make sure that the potatoes are done. Just a beaten egg. And I'm gonna brush it on this edge because I want it to seal really well with the top crust. Now there's a couple ways of doing this to make it look nice, seal it up really well. I'm gonna show you the way I like to do it. I'm just gonna place this over and just lay this down on top. So that egg wash is going to seal it real well. Now, obviously, got extra dough. So what I like to do, taking the edge of the knife and holding it at a 45-degree angle, I just kind of saw down Turn my pie around carefully. Do the same thing all the way around so that there's not a ton of excess. All right. Coming back. All right. So now I have a nice sealed pie. To touch it up, we're going to flute it a little bit. So you use 2 fingers in one. You lift up and push with the index finger. Then move your thumb over to the last little divot. Push up and pull. And you just continue to do that all the way around the pie. And what you get is a really nice fluted edge. It's not a really huge one. You could have left that extra dough on there, rolled it underneath, and really made this stand out. But I find that's just a little too much crust, if there is such a thing. So now we've got a nice sealed and fluted pie. We're going to take our egg wash to help with browning and just brush a nice thin layer on here. Start with the exposed areas, obviously. We're also going to get the flutes. And because I really don't like a totally ungarnished pie, I'm going to take some coarse black pepper and just sprinkle a little pepper on there. Maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on there. So this is ready to go in the oven. All right, the oven's ready. Let's put it in. I'm going to set this for 20 minutes and then I'm going to turn it down to 325 and we'll probably cook it for another 40 to 50 minutes. Timer went off. I'm going to turn down the stove to 325. Let's just take a look. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I'm going to just rotate it around and we will give it another 30 to 40 minutes. All right, there we go. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, looks mighty good. Mighty good. Let's just take this off of here really quick. We are going to test it real quick. I'm just going to take a paring knife and through that hole. I'm going to test it. Yep, looks good. Okay. So now comes the really hard part. You have to wait. So we're going to wait about 30 minutes before we cut into this, and then we'll give it a taste. See you in 30.